S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 is shaping up to be a really impressive game in what's been a massive year of video games so far, and with this game being in development for so long now, there's a hell of a lot of different mechanics and implementations in this game that seem very, very solid. So today I wanted to cover 7 of the most impressive mechanics we've seen so far in S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. Now the first one I guess isn't necessarily a mechanic, it's just an element of the game. This is the size of the map as well as the regions within the map too. Now this is being touted as one of the biggest maps that has ever been made for any video game ever. They've confirmed it is over 60 square kilometers in size, including 20 different regions, a lot of which will have different biomes and stuff like that, and they'll all generally feel a little bit different from each other. Now obviously size does not equal good. We've seen a lot of games out there with huge maps that just didn't end up being that exciting. If the world feels empty and there's nothing to do, then that is definitely a negative thing. I don't think that the bigger the map, the better it's going to be. But based on the previous S.T.A.L.K.E.R games, there's never really any dull moments in these maps. Granted, those ones were obviously a lot smaller, but with how deadly the Chernobyl exclusion zone is, even in the more bland areas of the map where maybe it's just a bit more open and there's not that many buildings and stuff like that, there is still going to be a lot of stuff out there. There is different anomalies. There are going to be heaps of creatures hunting you down, and there is a lot of great loot to be found as well. So the map is shaping up to be one of the most exciting parts of the game. They've also confirmed that a lot of the map is based on the actual real layout and real locations within Chernobyl. So some of these may be familiar to you guys if you've watched, for example, the Chernobyl series, even playing old games like Call of Duty 4, where there are the iconic missions within Chernobyl and we see some really famous locations. Those same locations are going to be in this game, which is definitely very exciting to see. They've also confirmed that you can pretty much go anywhere. There is really no areas that have boundaries outside of obviously the actual outside of the map itself. You can't just walk on forever, but within the map, they have pretty much said there is really nowhere that you can't go except for a few specific locations, and that is definitely very exciting to see. Now the next one might sound kind of strange, but I do see this as an impressive mechanic, and this is the fact that there are no RPG elements, for example, like skill points or levels. And like I said, I do find that to actually be really impressive. It seems like they are sticking to their guns and they are happy with how this game is, as well as how the original games were, where they were exactly the same as that. There was really no skill points or leveling system, and it does differentiate the game a little bit from a typical RPG, because this game really isn't an RPG. It's a survivalist first-person shooter set in an open world, and they're not trying to follow the modern day trends where most modern games tend to have some sort of RPG elements, whether that's a leveling system, having skill trees and stuff like that. All of those things are generally in line with an RPG, and yet GSC Game World, they don't really care. They are just sticking to what they believe works for this game, the more realistic approach, and that includes having literally no skill points or leveling systems within the game. They've also confirmed that there is no gear tied to the main story missions. Everything that you can find in terms of new weapons and upgrades and attachments and stuff like that, it's all just done through exploring and learning about the world. And they've said that that is almost where the, I guess, built-in leveling system works, is that we as the player of the game are actually leveling up because we're learning more about the world as we go. And I think that's a really, really cool way to approach it that is honestly very impressive, that they're so confident that they don't need a lot of those what can be seen as filler mechanics. Now something else that is very impressive, and I did a full video on this the other day, so be sure to go and check it out, but the anomaly system to me overall is really, really impressive. Now, the anomalies in this game, they mess with the physics of the world very heavily, some of them more so than others, and obviously some of them don't really affect it too much, but there are going to be some of these that really do mess with the physics, and that is not only awesome just because it looks cool and it can affect the gameplay, but I actually find that really impressive just because it must take a hell of a lot of work to have a bunch of different physics from one area to another without it being an actual different level. Now, obviously in a game set in space, for example, there might be one mission that takes place on a space station where there is gravity, and that is one set of physics. And then the next mission you might go out into space and obviously there's no gravity, meaning you've got multiple different physics within that game. The difference being those are different levels, and that is generally how it's done in most games. But in S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, you can have one set of physics. You can walk 100 meters in a different different direction, and the physics of that area will actually begin to change if there's an anomaly in that area. So I find that to be really impressive. I found it impressive in the original Stalker games, and pretty much 15 years later, I still find that to be very impressive, especially with how cool some of these look in the upcoming Stalker 2. Now, before we go any further, if you guys are new to the channel and you are interested in more Stalker 2 content, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. There is plenty more content on the way, so make sure you don't miss out. Now, another mechanic that I find to be very impressive is what they're touting as the A-Life AI system, which essentially causes dynamic situations in the world and results in some very realistic AI. Now, the AI in this game is very, very smart, but the cool thing is it's not to the point that it's unrealistic. I'm sure you guys have played games where, for example, maybe it's a stealth game, and once you alert the enemies, it's almost like they lock onto you. They all just instantly know exactly where you are, and oftentimes it feels like they kind of have like wall hacks and they just can always see you once you have alerted them, which at the end of the day isn't actually very realistic. If one enemy sees you and they are alerted, it's not like all 20 of the other enemies in that area would know exactly where you are immediately. They're going to have to actually look for you individually, and that is actually how it works in this game. Now, obviously, if someone sees or hears you, they know where you are. It's not like they're stupid. So if you're in their line of sight, then quite obviously they're going to know exactly where you are. But for example, if you fire a gun and there is an enemy nearby, they will obviously be alerted of your area, but they don't actually know your exact location. They will just know you are somewhere nearby. And the way that they have designed the AI in this game, they will then start to essentially hypothesize where you might be in the same way that a human being would actually process that information. So they'll kind of figure out a few different areas where you could potentially be. They'll see a piece of cover and they'll go, okay, maybe the enemy is behind the piece of cover. There might be a bush, and they'll go, well, if he's not behind the cover, maybe he's over in that bush. And they will kind of go through these processes in the same sort of way as a human. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect because AI will never be as realistic as a human, but they've done it in a way that is actually very smart, and it doesn't just feel like as soon as you're spotted, everyone knows exactly where you are and they're all hunting you down straight away. It is a lot more dynamic than that, and it will result in it feeling a lot more realistic. Now, something else that I find to be very impressive is that they've designed this game to have a really great story, but it's also enjoyable if you just completely ignore the main story. It's very rare that games do that, and it's going to mean that in this game we can just play however we want. If you guys do not care about the story at all and you just want to go off into the world and survive, you can do that, and that will still be a very, very enjoyable game. And on the flip side, if you guys just want to do the main path and you don't care about exploring, that will also be a very, very good game. And I feel like it's very rare that games can actually pull that off. It's very rare that I've ever heard developers literally say the words, "We don't care if you play the main story." Usually they want to sort of funnel people into playing that because they've put so much time and effort into it. But the team at GSC Game World have literally said, look, we're happy for you to play the main story if you want, but if you don't care about it at all and you just want to explore, go for your life. We want people to have fun however they want to have fun, and I think that is a really impressive way of approaching this game, especially since it is a single player, relatively linear story. Now, another thing about this game that is very impressive is the fact that there is dynamic day and night systems as well as weather systems too that really impact the game and its gameplay pretty drastically. Now, from what I'm gonna guess, nighttime will probably be way more dangerous than daytime. That's generally just how it goes in most games, but it could also have some sort of advantages. For example, if you have found night vision goggles throughout the game, which I can remember you could find in the original Stalker games, that could mean that you can actually see enemies much easier than you can see them in the daytime, because a lot of enemies will blend in a lot with the sort of bland landscape that we see in Chernobyl. They'll have camouflage and they will blend in quite a bit. And so even though nighttime may be more dangerous overall, it can also have some advantages and really affect the gameplay too. Like I said, the weather does also affect you. They've shown actual gameplay where I don't think the lightning hits the player in that gameplay, but they said at that time, lightning can actually strike you and it can deal damage. It can do the same to enemies. It can strike a tree and start fires and stuff like that. And it is just completely dynamic. None of it's scripted. And to me, not only is that very impressive, but it's pretty damn awesome, and I am very keen to see how that plays in game. Now, the final thing on my list today, this is not actually a mechanic, but it's just something that I find very impressive. And when we're making a video about things that are impressive, I kind of had to throw this into the video. This game, for those who didn't know, is being made by GSC Game World, a dev studio who is actually based in Ukraine, which not only is obviously where Chernobyl is based, but I'm sure you guys know that Ukraine has been at war for the last 2 years. And despite that, the team has continued to make this game, pushing through probably more adversity than really any development studio has ever faced in the history of video games. So to me, that is very, very impressive. The fact this game looks this good is actually crazy. And to be honest, even if this game didn't look that good, I would still find it so impressive that they've managed to put out a video game in such a crazy time for Ukraine. It's pretty easy to forget what is still going on over there pretty much daily, because at least where I'm from, I don't know about you guys, but like on the news in Australia, you don't often see anything about Ukraine and Russia being at war. So it is very easy to forget that that is still going on, and it has massively impacted the studio, resulting in multiple delays. Now, the game was actually meant to launch in 2022, but because of the war, they had to push it back. And then it was also delayed again earlier this year because they obviously need more time due to what is going on over there. So to me, I just find that to be super impressive. And honestly, even if this game sucks, I genuinely just think that is an awesome feat by the team. I hope it does well and it looks amazing to me, but even if it's a bit of a bust, that is still just such a crazy thing that they've managed to put out a game during a war in their own country, and I think they definitely deserve props for that. But that is it for 7 impressive mechanics within S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. Again, it's realistically 6 impressive mechanics, and the final one isn't really a mechanic, but I am keen to hear all of your thoughts on these mechanics and what you are the most excited to see, so be sure to leave a comment down below. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.